Second on the floor to table this item until the April 12th meeting. April, yeah. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Pose same sign. That passes unanimously and takes care of our unfinished business. Now we're gonna move on to new business. And we have consideration of engineering proposal for plating, utility, and street extensions, and I believe that is why Harlan is here this evening.
Yes, sir.
Harlan, I'll let you have the floor.
Okay. Mayor Travis, City Council, and City Staff, thank you for letting me come this evening. Let me say, first of all, I came as Ethan had asked, in order to be able to answer any of your questions. I didn't necessarily come tonight to ask you to approve the contract. Ethan asked me to just put it all together so you'd have something to look at in entirety relative to the proposed project there. I do have a map here that, if I could put it up, might help in our discussion just a little bit, and bear with me just a second. There's about 10 pieces to this puzzle, if you think about it, and that's how I've kind of gone about putting together a map here for you to consider. I guess initially was the Cedar Meadows second portion of the project, which includes the Main Street improvements, the Stutzman Circle improvements, 14th Street improvements, then sewer for the Main Street, sewer for the Stutzman Circle, and then water for each of those. And then added to that, at Ethan's request, is the extension of Main Street as a result of your purchase of the Powers property, and then the addition of the extension of the Stutzman Circle up to a cul-de-sac, to perhaps terminate in a cul-de-sac on the Powers property, and then a little bit of an extension that if we do end up platting, I think there were 4 or 5 lots on a concept that I saw on the Powers property, water, and maybe a short extension of sewer to serve those properties that might be platted there. I guess the thing that, before we get too far, is that you might want to consider taking action on tonight is moving forward perhaps with the surveying and the platting of the Powers property, drainage plan and that sort of thing, so that that ball can get started. And then you really, in my opinion, Brad can probably correct me, but aren't really prepared yet to obligate the city for engineering services for any of those special assessment projects that would occur in Cedar Meadows second, because obviously when we go through the platting process, that's when we submit, or the owner may very well submit a petition and then petition those improvements to be done by the city. Then that petition, you would take that up to obligate the city and pass a resolution to obligate the city then to spend the funds to hire that design and that sort of thing done. So any questions right now? I mean, as far as the extent, am I understanding the extent of the project? I came up and visited one time with Ethan about it, and we went through this spreadsheet, which I know is kind of lengthy, but how we kind of do this is initially the surveying and the platting is pretty much just a lump sum fee that I estimate. And that surveying fee that I've given you is what a surveyor is going to charge me to come out and survey the property. Give you a boundary, a legal boundary survey, and then also a topographic survey on the property. Then the preparation of the drainage plan is what I would prepare as part of the platting. Then also the drawing that we would then work with Ethan, and I assume the planning commission, to work through how you wanted that configured. And that sort of thing. So those are typically just lump sum costs that we estimate, and then based upon the infrastructure and the cost of the infrastructure for these improvements necessary to get the sewer, water, and streets into those developments, or into those phases of development, depending on which, if you decide to do it all at once, or you're going to do this, is Main Street going to go first, and then Stutzman Circle will be later. I know I have visited with the developer, and I think last I heard from Mr. Weber was the last thing they wanted to perhaps do was go ahead and do them together. That's the last I heard, and that would be something that we would want to hear from the developer on to go forward. But anyway, what I've essentially done is gone to the effort, of estimating the quantities of street, curb and gutter, drainage, water lines, sewer lines, because, costs are directly related to lengths and areas of things that you put down. And then using those costs, then we typically total those construction costs up, and then based upon some percentages, the first one being a 10% contingency. We automatically plug in 10% just to make sure any of our unit price costs that we estimate, if there's any fluctuations or there's a drastic increase in price, we're covered by that, or the petition that might be submitted would be covered for that. Obviously, there are portions of the project that are city at large. I think the city in the past, in previous phases, has done the water lines, put the water lines in. Sanitary sewer, though, is being assessed to the properties. And so I've kind of outlined some of the benefit districts there that would be set up for one of those extensions. And then street improvements, the Stutzman Circle improvements are pretty much 100% developer, except for perhaps this cul-de-sac that would be on city property. That's a 31-foot wide street. The main street improvements within Cedar Meadows Second are 100% developer, except we were going to build that street 41 foot wide and the interior 10 feet. I think we did this previously, or maybe estimated previously, was going to be, the city was going to pick that up. So that's just some previous information that I operated on, and if that's incorrect, you can correct me as we go along here. And then the extension of Main Street, and again, I just drew this as a straight line to try and estimate some quantities from the north line of Cedar Meadows up to 10. Obviously, I talked with Ethan about maybe putting a little bit of a curvilinear alignment in that street as we cross the slough and then come up and then hit 10th Street and line up with the Main Street right away to the north. So these are just some concepts at this point in time. And so this spreadsheet that I don't know if Ethan were you?
We didn't disclose that.
I should have brought you some copies. I apologize. But I broke out each one of those pieces, the water line for Main Street, the water line for Stutzman Circle, the Main Street improvements themselves, the portion within Cedar Meadows, the portion within the Powers property, and then moved on to 14th Street, and then Stutzman Circle, and then at the bottom of the spreadsheet I have the estimate of the water line improvements that were going to be 100% water line improvements along Main, water line improvements along Stutzman Circle. So there's about the plating, the infrastructure improvement, and then the last piece, I guess, is the study and permitting for this slough drainage crossing. I think I talked to Pat, and I think he shared with me those boxes, I believe, under Chestnut. Our 8x3, I think, that's what we measured, or it's been a while back. It was last fall, I think, when he measured those. So I just estimated that. But according to state statute, that's classified as a stream obstruction. So we need a stream obstruction permit from the Kansas Division of Water Resources. And because it is located in a mapped floodway, FEMA has mapped a floodway along the slough there. We have to go in and develop a hydraulic study that using the model that FEMA based their model on. We take that same study. We have to put a box in there or a structure in there, put the fill in there that we're potentially going to create by the road, and demonstrate that there is a zero rise for what we're doing in the floodway. Zero rise to any backwater. We can't back any water upstream of that. So that 8x3 is just a hypothetical or an assumption based upon the existing. We won't really know that until we actually do the hydraulic study. Then we have to develop a set of plans for that, fill out a permit application. Then we send that into DWR and I think several $100 fee. I don't know the exact fee for that. And then it goes through a 30-day environmental review process. And then also we're gonna have to check with the Corps of Engineers on this to see if a Corps of Engineers permit is gonna be required here. I've kind of gone away from trying to say, oh, I don't think there is a permit or there could be a permit. I just got to go to the Corps and ask them because they have their own set of rules and I don't claim to be able to recite those rules. So, but part of that permitting process and in, I don't know, did you give them maybe a copy of that, the preliminary engineering?
Yeah.
That was what, there was a $10,000 estimate not to exceed. If it's less, obviously, we won't charge you that, but that permitting process and the requirements of that permitting process are just so hard for me to say a to the penny amount because I don't know what's going to be involved in satisfying state government and federal government to permit that. But that's the first thing we've got to have before we can actually make sure we have the correct size for that drainage structure there. So the one thing I will say is I know there was some desire to have a park be part of the Powers property development. I really haven't plugged anything in there because I don't know what the extent or the desire of the city or your agreement with the landowner was there for the development of that park. So, you know, if there is more information that Ethan can share that with me, I mean, I can lay out a park if you know what the city wants and that sort of thing. If we need to go get a design professional like a landscape architect or something like that, then, you know, there'd be associated fees involved with that. So that's just an overview right quick.
I think the crux to that park is to be more of just a nature park
Okay.
with walking trails.
Was there a parking, I thought, was there a parking lot involved perhaps or
I think
something?
that was, we'd discussed that being part of the street.
Okay, yeah, that can be easily incorporated into the street improvements that we'd propose.
We weren't talking about any of that until we actually get through all of this mess though, right, first?
Yeah, I'd say,
Before we ever even started the design phase of that park.
the crossing is gonna dictate a lot of what's able there, depending on what size we have to even cross the slough and the cost there, so.
Okay.
I mean, the nature park fit in the best because it is still in floodway land, but anything we would do in a natural style park is going to leave the natural environment, not be adding structures and things that would cause us a headache, so.
Yeah.
And I apologize, I didn't bring you all copies of this, but it's kind of double-sided, it's kind of busy, and I didn't know if I'm happy to provide it to you for a future meeting if you like, so you can review it. But those costs that you see in there, except for the plating, the surveying and plating, are pretty much based on percentages as a result of these construction costs and roughly 8% for design and 6 to 7% for construction administration, inspection, construction administration, and testing and that sort of thing. So I tried to give you the whole ball of wax. I know you probably were shocked by the numbers that were involved there, but I will say if this is a whole package thing, you know, I can take a second look at those numbers because I know, oh, we're not just doing Stootsman Circle or we're not just doing Main Street, which I think would be for the developer and for the city would be advantageous so that you'd get better pricing on a larger project. Your unit prices would probably be a little less for a larger project like that. So I'm going to end what I have to say and then try to answer any of your questions you'd like to ask.
I do have one question, and I just want to bring it up because I'm on that committee. Do you have any provisions for this crossing across the slough to allow for sidewalks, or has anybody brought that to your attention?
Well, what I intentionally did here, that is going to be a proposed 100-foot right-of-way. That's what Main Street right-of-way is. And so I was going to extend that box clear to the limits of that right-of-way so that we would have our roadway back-to-back of curbs only 41 foot. We would potentially have room to run a sidewalk up and over the top of that box on one side or both sides if so wished. Because I put in my estimate, I believe at least 100, if not 120 foot of box to span the entire right-of-way.
Okay, we are working on an SRTS program for Halstead, And we would probably ask for that portion when we go out for funding for that, so be good to know that.
Is that a grant program? Yes, okay, for sidewalk, okay.
Safe routes to school.
Safe routes to school, okay, yep.
Harlan, what is the offset from Main Street as it exists on the south side as to Main Street on the north side of that slough? You have that dimension?
I don't have, I'm gonna say maybe 25, 30 feet, I don't know, exactly.
So what you would do is probably design that
Put a reverse curve.
crossing to where it's the shortest route
Yeah,
across
yeah,
as
yeah.
much as possible.
Right, right. I can't say that it would be, exactly a perpendicular crossing, but we put the box in on a skew, like what I've shown here, that kind of represents conceptually the box. And that would be a precast box, so they would come out and just, set those in side by side. And so we'd have instant box in probably about a week, once we get the size done, but, yeah, I'd put a reverse curve in the alignment of that right of way, and we'd try to hit it as square as we could, but I can't say it's gonna be exactly perpendicular. That's gonna help we need the box to be on the center line alignment of the stream just for hydraulic purposes.
Non-restrictive.
To make, yes, yeah.
Ethan, what are we looking for this evening? Are we looking for a motion to approve the plating and survey work?
Yeah, to Harlan's point, really until we have it surveyed and platted, which would also provide the dedications for the final of where Main Street needs to go on the Powers property and solidify any potential lots that would be added of residential nature on land that's currently city-owned. That's the first step, and then going ahead and moving forward on the permitting for the actual slough crossing, because we need to determine how expensive, we've put in boxes, but the feasibility of that way we know, are we talking something boxes, or are we talking something that's way more robust to get a zero rise, which might call Main Street, into question completely. Don't
Yeah,
think so.
I would hope we wouldn't have to go to a span bridge, because if we get into a span bridge, then your cost goes up.
And my hunch is if you go ask the federal government if a permit's required, they're gonna say, well, of course it's
Well,
required.
yeah, yeah. Well, what they'll say is send us your plan, and then we'll determine that, so.
See, in the contract, and I can ask Harlan to send an updated one, that just covers these specific items, but, I would think a not to an exceed amount of 25,000 would cover the plating and surveying, and then the up to 10,000 amount that, Harlan has indicated on the hydraulic portion. And we can bring back, because we do want those benefit petitions, to be solidified before we go ahead and engage the engineering, so we can put those on the special assessment.
Well, and I think this preliminary work needs to be done, but I also think that this needs to be part of a council work session on some of the final plans going forward with this expansion. So I think this is a great idea.
And I guess I didn't summarize, but essentially, it was kind of interesting how it turned out. The total project cost for everything was about, the developer's cost worked out to be about $736,000. And the city's cost ends up being about $750,000. So it's almost a 50-50 split, pretty close to that. And again, these are just estimated costs at this point, and we would hope that we would be able to, once we develop detailed plans and that sort of thing, that, our bids would come in well under that. But we're looking at $1.5 million project here, developer, city combined, so.
So we need a motion to move forward with platting and surveying
And permit work.
and permit work. And that would be do we need to put a not to exceed price on that of $40,000,
I think 25 should cover it.
$25,000?
Yeah, I think that's adequate, yes.
Have
I would
Harlan
make that motion.
send me an updated one.
Yeah, and if it's okay, I can send you just a simple one-page proposal for that type of work. Simplify it much more than the one Brad would require for the engineering services. So.
We're saying, Brad.
It's just abuse I'm used to.
Is that your formal motion?
Was that your motion? Second that motion.
So we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve the initial phases of this development with, surveying and plating and permit work. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and that motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harlan.
And that was not to exceed 25,000, just to make sure that's on the record. Thank you, Harlan.
You're welcome.
Next item under new business is consideration of request for consent annexations. I think we have a couple of those to look at this evening.
Yeah, let me give you kind of the quick overview, if I might. We have two different properties. The Williams property is a private ownership consent annexation requested by Larry Williams, and I've confirmed with the local registrar that that is in his name only. It's passed into his name, and so we don't have a trust involved. We don't have the joint property interest, so he can sign off on that. And it's a very simplistic process at that point because it meets several different standards. The two most important being that it's consensual by the current rightful owner and that it's adjoining our property in some way, shape, or form, which it is. So since it's contiguous to the current property boundaries of the city, the legislature hasn't stepped in at the same level that they have as a encumbrance on annexation in other types of settings. That would be unilateral on our part, for example. This is a property owner asking that this property be brought in. So all that would be left to do once we accept the consent request is to pass the ordinance, which I gave to you tonight. It's premature. It isn't something we'll do this evening, but that will be it. And the property is annexed in then at that point with a single publication of that ordinance once it's passed. So that one's very straightforward. The second one is not terribly much more involved based upon how it's all worked out. And that is a consent annexation that we, as the city, as a municipal corporation, ask of ourselves. We own property, which is the golf course, the 46 acres plus. It is non-adjoining, so that changes it just a bit. If it were adjoining, it would be even more simplistic, but since it is not, we have to pass a resolution which gets served upon the county, asking them to review within 30 days from the point that they receive it, and make a determination by a 2/3 vote of the existing board, in this case, since there's only two of the three, that it will not in any way, shape, or form impede, negatively impact, or impede growth of, or any other type of county-wide development. Since we own it and it is a golf course, I don't think there's any issue there. And so far, no one's ever indicated any real problem with doing that. But once they pass that, then it comes back to us. And again, it's just a basic ordinance at that point that we will pass, publish, and then that property is brought in as well. So the one action that we can take this evening is to authorize the mayor to sign the request, the consent for annexation by the owner, which is schizophrenic because it's us. But I still do it that way just so we have all that paperwork on file. Also secondarily, then the resolution as the second step of that be passed this evening so that it can be submitted hopefully tomorrow. I think Ethan has said he was going over, and I could if he didn't, and have that resolution passed and authorize the mayor's signature on that as well to take it to the county. Once it's received by them, their 30 days starts.
So do we need 3 motions?
Basically, well, since Larry hasn't signed, really only 2.
Motion to
To
agree with
approve
the
the
consent?
mayor signing the consent request that we then receive right here and now. And then a second motion to pass the resolution asking the county to consider our request as a consent to annex our own property.
Okay.
But you want the motions, 2 separate motions?
Yes.
For each of them?
Yes,
So a total of 4.
actually it's a total of 2.
I'll make a motion to accept the consent for annexation for the Williams property into the city of Halstead.
Actually, no.
Golf course only.
We don't have his signature on a consent yet. This one, that one I'd set aside. That's why it's not four.
That's why it's
I
only two, right?
misunderstood.
Just
I
two.
We are only doing the
The
golf.
one on the golf course.
So okay, same thing, except is for the Wedgewood Golf Course
Correct.
And authorize the mayor's signature.
and authorizing the mayor's signature.
Second.
Okay, let me see, I'll get this right. We've got the motion and the second on the floor for the consent annexation, basically for the Wedgewood Golf Course.
Correct.
To be brought into the city limits of Halstead.
Correct.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. So that,
Second motion is then to approve and adopt the resolution and authorize the mayor's signature that this be requested of the county to be reviewed for authorization to allow us to annex it in.
I second what he said.
What he said.
Except for you can't make a motion.
Motion what he said, you can second it. You got that, Jamie? Yeah.
And the resolution number, just for you guys, would be 02-22-2104.
okay, we have a motion for a resolution to send to the county on this annexation of the Wedgewood Golf Course into the city limits of Halstead, and it's been seconded. So I would ask for all in favor to say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. And that motion carries unanimously. So basically, we've set the groundwork in place to try to annex Wedgewood Golf Course into the city limits of Halstead.
And
And
if
for
I may,
those,
what is the next step then on Williams?
We need to get Larry's signature,
So we need Larry's signature.
We'll do this again.
And then we'll do the rest.
and then we'll take note that we received it, accept it, and then do the ordinance. At that point, we'll publish, and that's the extent of what's required on that one.
Ethan, if it's not too much, we have been discussing why we're annexing the golf course. A lot of the citizens probably don't. Would you like to touch on that, please?
Basically, the golf course, and we have some other examples like the wastewater treatment plant or the cemetery, that's city-owned property, but it's not within the corporate city limits. Wedgewood provides a particular interesting because it's occupied, so when there's issues, it's easier for us to deal with it from a logistic and legal standpoint, like when there's vandalism on the course, if that's actually within the corporate city limits, it can actually be run under our local ordinances and have those enforced, because right now it's county and it's property in the county. Doesn't mean our law enforcement still don't go respond when there's issues out there. It's just when it comes time for the city prosecutor to look at it, it helps streamline that. It streamlines some of the tax issues that are out there too, like the sales tax, things that to make sure that the city's getting its fair portion back from various taxes that are paid out there on personal property and whatnot as well.
Well, I'd just like to point out that this is merely for the efficiency of the city, and there's no hidden agenda other than just making city life easier for council and police and everybody else. That's all this is.
okay, do we need to touch on Larry's deal, or will that come back to the meeting after he signed it?
Yeah, we'll bring that back. We had hoped to have it finalized to the point his signature would have been on it this evening. But again, it's something that we've talked about in work sessions, and you guys were aware, and he's aware that the city's amicable to bringing that into city limits. So I will get with him, and hopefully we will have that ready to be complete next meeting.
Okay, so are you satisfied that we are complete with that agenda item?
I think
Okay.
so.
Well, in that case, I'll move on to the next one. Discussion of natural gas situations. I'll let Ethan head this one up. Before you do, though, I do want to point out that it's been brought to my attention that the mayor's always responsible for the weather in town. And last week, I did pass that on to the council president.
Well, we're going to try and show a presentation here with our new lovely with me. Hopefully that pops up. I think Pat's gonna switch, so you guys are seeing this
There
in
we go.
real time. So this is kind of an overview. Everyone's, I think, very well aware from state news, local news, cities, social media. We've pushed out, there was a substantial increase in the cost of natural gas that happened at about the worst possible time it could when we as a state were experiencing extremely sub-zero weather. I'm going to start off with just some information of how the city of Halstead even purchases gas. We're a member of the Kansas Municipal Gas Association, or KMGA, as I'm going to drop it down for the rest of the presentation. They help manage our city's gas purchasing and provide technical assistance. It's basically an interlocal pool. It's comprised of over 45 public agencies that provide natural gas, including some power plants or cities like the city of Halstead. Normally, to help keep price stability, KMGA uses a blended method to purchase, which is fixed price supply, first of month, and daily index pricing. You can see there a fixed price supply. Those deals are for a certain amount of MMBTUs, and those are made well in advance of weather. And so what we would have seen in February, those deals were made in the summer of 2020 for gas consumption now in February 2021. Then we also have first of month pricing, which is typically done just like it sounds, on the first or the second of the month of which the gas is to be consumed. And then there's daily index pricing. The first two methods do not allow volume to be increased or decreased. So what you say you're going to buy, you have to buy. So the issue and why you don't 100% do a fixed price supply is because there's volatility in what gas demand is. If the average temperature in February wouldn't have fallen and no one's running heat, if we bought 100% of what we thought we'd need on a fixed price or first of month, we're essentially buying gas we didn't use. We still have to pay for that gas. Our residents suffer because of that. So daily index pricing has always been used in some way, shape, or form to kind of fill in the gaps. We have several large industrial customers, same thing. Depending on where they're at in their production cycles, they're pulling a lot more natural gas in for their use than they are other times. So that daily index pricing is really what caused the issue that we're going to see. We anticipate and project our anticipated gas needs 6 to 18 months in advance. The nice part of participating in KMGA is those projections are only for their planning, and they don't lock us in to the purchase of that amount. So they still work with us for the average consumption we see that can change substantially depending on what industries are running, as well as how cold it is and how many residences are pulling natural gas. Okay, so this is a graph, and this shows all 4 of the major pipelines, and you can tell from the scale that flat line, that's not because gas prices were constant. Within there, you're seeing fluctuation of 25 to 50 cents a day, up and down. And from February 1st to February 11th, prices were what we would consider normal, what we've historically paid. Then on the 12th, you see your first kind of major jump, which was about to 10 times the normal amount. Within 24 hours of that, prices jumped to almost 150 times the normal amount. You can see that top spike. The blue line is the pipeline that Halstead utilizes. Prices were at their highest point, $622 a unit of gas. So to put that in perspective, that'd be like going to fill up your car and the pump saying it's $622 per gallon of gas. So that graph leaving a lot to be desired. Here's broken down specifically to Southern Star. You can see that gas was between $2 and $4. We started to see some increases demand, and then on the 11th, you get that first jump kind of to $9. And then you go from the 11th at the starting point of $9, and you can see again just how fast they rose. The flat line you see from the 13th through the 16th is because that was a holiday weekend. So 3 days were basically locked in at the same price. And just as frustrating that prices rose as fast as they did, we were very thankful when we saw it, but it was also frustrating to see gas prices go from 622 all the way back down to $40 in the course of a day. So timeline of events. February 10th, we received notice from KMGA that high demand across the region was resulting in increased prices and demand, and they are asking for conservation as supply was getting harder to find and secure for the weekend. On the 11th and 12th, we began communicating following that communication on the 10th, conservation tips to resident, and discussing the need to cut load with our heaviest gas consumers, mostly on the industrial side. On the 14th, Governor Kelly issued a state emergency disaster declaration because by the end of the 12th, if you'll remember from the graph, prices were all over $300 a unit on our pipeline. And that was due in part to the wind chills as well as the stress on the natural gas and electric utilities. Obviously, residents probably remember hearing from the electric side, Evergy communicating, that they were considering doing rolling blackouts because of issues with the electric grid. And these issues are kind of correlated, but also distinctly unique. February 15th, we received notice that the prices were estimated to increase to over $622 per unit, which is just 235 times the estimated monthly unit cost for February. We got our transmission pipeline issuing a human needs advisory, which essentially is saying any gas that's not being used directly to heat somebody in a home or for human needs like nursing homes, hospitals should not be pulling any gas load. And KMGA began holding daily meetings, of which several of our governing body members got to listen in on those for cities on the ongoing situation. Because at that point, we weren't sure if gas prices were even going to start falling. On the 16th, we received notice from KMGA that only 2/3 of the anticipated demand was able to be secured for the following day. And again, that's because everybody was needing natural gas and there's only so much supply. Luckily, we were able to have our consumption of the city overall fall where we did not see an issue. And then February 17th, we start to see the situation normalize. Gas prices fell from the high of $6.22, $7.80.5 to $44.53. So our priorities during the crisis. The first was ensure that gas continued to be available for residents and our local businesses. We at no point did we ever think that we needed to cut the city off, issue a blanket in order to shut people off, or we didn't want to get notice from Black Hills, who supply to us that gas wasn't going to be coming through the gate into the city for use. Second was communicating with the customers on the need to conserve, both due to the demand and the anticipated pricing. And then the third was communicating with the governing body, KMGA, the Kansas Municipal Utilities, state legislative and executive branches, and congressional delegation on the crisis. And the last, as far as dealing now that the crisis is hopefully abated, gas prices today fell again. They're back down into what I would say are normal ranges for what we would see this typically, like back under $3 a unit. So now what's next? The biggest thing, and one that's not even going to be necessarily settled this evening, is dealing with the financial reality of bills that are estimated 10 times or more and ease stress on customers. The first thing to point out is the city itself is a gas customer, and that we purchase this gas, from Black Hills and Southern Star, and then put it in our distribution system for our end users. So we're responsible for the consumed gas in the month of February due to that at that higher rate. And that bill's gonna be due before it's reflected on the residents' utility bills even. To put this in perspective, our total 2021 gas budget was $1.6 million. We estimate that the February billing alone may well be over $2 million. So, and gas is handled as far as we get what the average purchase price of gas was for the month. That sets the base rate. The city then adds its overhead, which is a set fee, doesn't fluctuate. So whether gas is purchased at $3 or $300, the city's overhead rate stays the same. So the city does not benefit from this in any way, shape, or form in terms of the money that would come to the city on those overhead charges. So, and at this point, it's still very much an estimate. We don't know. We hope to know later from this week from KMGA what our financial situation is going to look like on this bill. And we're not the only city that's dealing with this. And those are some very big numbers, and we're going to have some serious discussions of how that's done. I can tell you for our January billing for KMGA, we already had a call. In order to keep gas flowing over the holiday weekend, KMGA had to put up a collateral call from one of the pipelines of $1 million. And so we've already been assessed our portion of that to keep gas flowing to our residents, which added just shy of $80,000 onto our normal KMGA bill, which was in the bills and payroll for you this evening. The good news is we have the cash on hand right now to pay that. We can transfer that out of reserves. Our gas ordinance currently stipulates that, that would be part of the cost of, providing gas to our residents and businesses. And so that cost is divided out. It was a collateral call for February consumption. We would assume that's going to come off the February bill in some way, shape, or form, since it was essentially a prepay for that gas. But we're talking, gas rates basically being $2.84 more, as the base charge being increased by $2.84 to factor in that collateral call with this billing we got now, or we can pay it out of reserves and loop that into whatever we begin doing with the February billing. To put that 284 in perspective, on a residence, you'd see an average increase on a utility bill of around $21 for the month for consumption in January. So,
But that's just on that 80,000.
yeah, that's just on the 80,000. That's not the big bill.
Right.
That's just basically making that collateral call portion part of our rate immediately as opposed to waiting. So our second priority is going to be to continue to communicate and advocate with our local, state, and federal decision makers on the need to take action due to the unprecedented situation. And that is kind of where we're at now. We will be going to the county tomorrow, asking them to make a formal disaster declaration that would, simplify or get us a step ahead as far as Harvey County and the city of Halstead on if there is some sort of federal aid and the president were to declare a federal disaster in the area, that already puts us steps ahead as far as our county having a local disaster declaration. So we continue to work with our legislators. I know there's a lot of questions. The city has them as well as how do prices spike that quick, that fast? And how did they come down just as fast? And we don't have answers now. And I know that's frustrating for people to hear, and it's frustrating for us. And we'll do our best to get those answers. I'm sure there will be fallout from the last 6 days on that aspect and the pricing for probably years to come in the future. But right now it doesn't help us basically know of how are we going to pay the bills that will be coming in another month. So there were 2 handouts for you. The first is Resolution 222-2103. This is a resolution declaring a local state of financial emergency. This is basically done again to help prepare, because this is a very unique situation. No one in memory can remember prices ever going to this point. Even the last time there was a large increase, gas prices topped out at $40 a unit, not $623 a unit. So this would declare essentially that it's the governing body saying what the situation was, that we are looking at 10 to 240 times the normal prices of what we're expected to paying, and this is going to cause financial stress for our gas utility at the very least. And it's just, we will use this to inform our discussion with the county commission tomorrow, saying hey, it's serious enough, we're declaring a local disaster because of what happened. The other is ordinance 1307, which would update some of the language in our gas setting rate. For full transparency, the 3 years you see there are taken from the existing ordinance that's already in play. So nothing was done with the city's overhead charge. It has to do with clarification on how the city bills. We had some old language that was not caught as far as the city billing in MMBTU. We bill in MCF. So we clarify that in that very first section. And then the total computed per unit cost, again, says to what we are actually seeing, and that our total computed per unit cost is determined from the most recent gas supplier bill reflecting. So there, again, just as we look back at our gas rate ordinance, what our ordinance allows us to do with the potential setting, we noticed we needed some cleanup there of what we're billing and what customers actually see, because it talks a lot of MMBTU, which is not the unit we bill in. So that is why an ordinance is being sought. It's not to secretly change the rates. It doesn't change our rate calculation at all. It just clarifies the language and actually puts it into what is seen on a bill. So that being said, I will gladly try and answer the questions I can. I know all of you got to participate in those KMGA meetings to various degrees, so some of this might have been review for you, some of it might not have. But that is our presentation, and I wish I had more financial information to present so we could actually talk. We still don't know exactly on the collateral call. I mean, normally we get our bill from KMGA and are given basically, a 15 to 20 day window to pay that. I can tell you this most recent invoice, we got it, payment was expected on demand, basically. So I anticipate that we will continue to see that, because they're an agency composed of they're a public agency composed of other public agencies, so they're not sitting on a giant cash reserve either. When they get those bills, they're going to know, or they're gonna need collateral as well, I mean, essentially to pay those.
So ultimately, whenever this dollar amount finally comes in, right, because there's a lot of unknowns, my question is, do we need to, you're expecting that to come in later this week, right? Mm-hmm. Do we need to have another meeting to discuss this and see how we're gonna handle it? Because ultimately, that's gonna be a major cost with regards to our small businesses that we have here. And then we've got all of our local citizens as well, that won't be able to afford to pay that kind of a bill.
Yeah.
Is that a work session topic?
No, that'll probably be a special meeting because we won't have time to delay a decision. I mean, we're legally obligated to pay those bills when they come, even if we suspect there's price gouging or something untoward was happening with gas prices. That doesn't change that we have a bill to pay. And the fallout of us saying, no, we're just not going to pay, will probably lead to some unanticipated issues, including, again, the potential for our suppliers to say, you're a non-paying customer. We can turn you off just as easily as we can turn a resident off. That being said, I mean, I think they're still operating, that gas needs to be supplied to those that need it. And that's our operating model and something that we'll advocate, and I believe that you all would be supportive of, is, we're not going to be looking at doing compulsory shutoffs in the near future due to this, because we know it's gonna affect everyone, ourselves included. So it's in our interest to be understanding and try and work through the process as much as we can.
So Michael, like you said, we're gonna pay the bill, and then we can go back and visit it on how we work with
How we handle it,
customers
yeah.
on maybe a case-by-case basis. Is that
Well,
your understanding?
I mean, there's multiple options, and some of it depends of, say that KMGA would take on debt service basically to pay these bills and then assess that to us over time. Well, that, would put us down one path versus if they just call our entire bill at one time, then we're gonna have to decide how we're gonna handle that.
And there are still some options on the table. I've been on most of these KMGA meetings and, part of that process is passing this resolution to declare a local emergency tonight, and then the county's gonna follow suit. And we're very hopeful that the federal government's gonna step in and maybe we'll see some FEMA funds go towards this. It's an avenue of pursuit for us. But in the meantime, even if we get FEMA reimbursement down the road, we're gonna have to pay this bill to keep our gas flowing.
Yeah.
So that's why we may have a need for another special meeting coming up.
We need to figure out where that money comes from too.
Yeah.
That's a considerable amount of money.
Well, to get step one out of the way, I'd make a motion to pass resolution number 2-22-21-03, resolution of the city of Halstead, Kansas, declaring a local state of financial emergency.
Second.
Heard the motion and the second to approve, resolution 2-22-21-03. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those same sign, that motion carries unanimously.
Do we need to do a motion for the update to the ordinance 1307?
Yes.
So I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 1307.
Heard a motion and a second to approve ordinance 1307. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those same sign, and that motion carries unanimously.
And we might be able to delay, as far as how we're gonna handle this collateral call, that if we paid out of reserves, that's almost a third of our reserve in the gas fund. And don't pass that on to the end user. If we do have, and can have a special meeting this week, before we compute the rate on the bills that will be going out, which again, those bills are for January's consumption, not February's consumption, because we do bill a month in arrears. You guys might be able, so I would just ask you, I guess, to keep in mind of how you want to deal with that, because the collateral call is kind of our first little hurdle that we need to deal with, and whether we're going to delay passing that on to end, pass it on at all, or
I think at this point, my expectation would be that us filing these declarations, right? The fact that at some point there'll be some monies recovered. So,
We hope.
yeah, we hope. I would personally prefer not to see it passed on right now until we get final numbers and all settled.
And I think Ethan also said that the collateral is payment in advance for fuel. So we should see a reduction in the second billing based on the collateral payments.
Right, right.
Somewhat, and, I don't know how legally they can do all that. It seemed like a dirty trick to me when I heard about it. They basically told us that if you don't pay $1 million up front, we're gonna shut your gas off, is basically what we were told. That's what that collateral call, why it was required.
But
And,
then in the next breath, Dennis, recall they said we're not going to be shutting off any cities.
yeah,
So there was contradiction there.
there is, and there's all kinds of regulation and everything, that everybody's gonna have to get through, and that's why we've got our legislatures involved in it, and, it's gonna be a mess, and we're just gonna have to keep at it until we figure out what all the right answers are.
And it could take years.
It could take a while. So I would encourage those in the public that are trying to keep track of where we're at as a city as far as the information we find out. Look at our city Facebook. Usually if we have information, we're gonna roll it out there first as a way to get it out to the public, so. Does anybody else have any more comments regarding this agenda item, or are you ready to move on to the next one?
Let's move on. That was depressing.
Right.
Really?
We'll move on to the next item, and it's a consideration for an offer for an ambulance, and Andy, he's here. Andy's gonna step to the podium, and hopefully he's gonna tell us he's gonna sell that ambulance for enough to pay our gas bill.
$80,000.
Mr. Mayor, council members, I wish I could tell you that, but I can't. As you know, we put that EMS unit through the brokering firm, Brindley Mountain. How we came about those numbers was during the research, even prior to us putting it to the broker. I did talk with the manufacturer at that time. They offered us $15,000. They weren't interested in the cab or chassis. They just wanted the box to rebuild the box and move it. However, they did tell us that we should be able to get $20,000 to $25,000 out of it if we sold it outright, but to keep their offer on the table if we sat forever. This morning, we had a gentleman from New Jersey dealing with us from a company out there. Had me send some more pictures of some side damage on that unit. We pulled some history on the hours and some other questions he had as far as tire years and stuff. I learned a lot about numbers on tires and telling when they were made and things today that I didn't know about till I made calls to Nathan. They came back. We listed that ambulance for $25,000 because they told us 20 to 25. So I just listed it at the top number they gave me. They came back and did a offer of $22,500 for that unit. Basically, part of that was to offset some costs that they were going to do to fix that one side while it was being shipped. They're going to stop it in Missouri and get that fixed, and then shipping costs just to move it out to New Jersey. I sent Ethan that information and said, I told him, I'm going to bring it to my council and see what my council says, and we'll go from there. That will actually net us $20,250 because the brokerage company charges us that 10% fee that we went through on the contract for the advertising and all of that. So, my question, ladies and gentlemen, is how would you like me to proceed on this? Do you want me to sit on it? Do you want me to move
I
forward?
think so. That's more than what I was thinking.
In your discussion with the brokerage company, what did they give you as an estimated value of that unit?
They gave me an $18,000 to $20,000 estimate.
Okay, so we're within that range and we can shut the door on this.
We can.
You need a motion? All right.
Yeah, I don't have authority to sell.
Allow, Mr. Lowe to sell the ambulance for $22,500 and move on.
Second.
Heard the motion and the second to sell the ambulance in question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
We're a quarter of the way there.
Don't spend any electricity vacuuming that ambulance out.
Good job, Andy.
Got anything else to sell?
Well, that wraps up our new business section of our agenda this evening and moves us on to our executive session. And it would appear we do have one of those planned this evening, so I would entertain that motion now.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I move that the city of Halstead I move that the Halstead City Council recess into executive session for 20 minutes to discuss pending litigation and contract negotiations pursuant to the consultation with an attorney on matters that would be deemed privilege in the attorney-client relationship, exception KSA 4319B2. We asked, in addition to the governing body, the following persons join the governing body in executive session: the city manager and city attorney. The open meeting governing body to reconvene in the city council chamber at 8:30 p.m.
Second.
Heard the motion and the second to enter into executive session. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We will be moving to the other room, council.
See, now you.
Okay, we are back from our executive session. Is there any action to be taken as a result of? Seeing no movement from the council, we will move on to our next agenda item, which is reports. And governing body starts first. Tonight, I will start with you, Denise.
I've got nothing.
Sam,
Try and stay warm.
Mike, George,
No, sir.
Ed.
Just enjoy today's and tomorrow's weather, sunny and bright.
I second that. Now we'll move on to the manager report, and that's you, Ethan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Departmental activities for the city since the last meeting. Police responded to 53 calls for service, including 12 traffic stops and 7 criminal cases. Staff continue working on projects such as the conversion to a combined car and body camera system for officers and purchasing of new service weapons for departmental personnel. Fire has responded to 8 calls for service recently. Staff completed the sale of the rescue boat and trailer to Colwich Fire Department and have completed yearly SCBA maintenance and battery checks. EMS have responded to 27 calls for service, bringing the total to 88 for the year. Of those, 40% have been in the Sedgwick response area. Staff have begun fielding inquiries on the listed EMS unit for sale, which I guess is an old note at this point. And they did complete sale of the truck to the Burton Fire District. Staff are also currently undergoing State Board of Pharmacy inspection and preparing for State Board of EMS relicensing. Parks and Recreation continued working on field preparation as weather allowed, as practices for the high school start next week. Staff also completed and helped with snow removal during the inclement weather. Preparations have also been underway for youth basketball camp that starts today. And the basketball camp this week is in lieu of the normal basketball season, which was canceled earlier this year due to lack of facilities. Wedgwood has dealt with the course being closed due to weather the past week and to limit the amount of winter kill on the greens and fairways. Staff have completed seasonal equipment maintenance, met with Regear for some warranty work on the clubhouse remodel, and continue to sell memberships and schedule tournaments for the normal play year. Public Works staff have been working on building maintenance issues at City Hall and the city shop, preparing equipment for the winter weather, and then snow removal and sanding of streets. Staff responded to 2 frozen services and 3 meter sets that needed thawed. Staff also repaired a water service and winterized 328 main to allow for the community building to be shut off from gas consumption. Staff also completed 3 building inspections and 6 locate requests. Staff continued working on the AMI implementation and getting ready for the installation of the new storm sirens. Administrative staff have balanced January and reconciled with the city treasurer. Staff continue working on the transition to the voice over IP phone system, and hopefully we will be switched over to the new system by the end of this week. So just to put that out there, if residents might see an interruption for some time while we get that phone system switched over. And then there'll be a whole new reading and it will sound different when you call the city. So just to be prepared for that. A great deal of time has also been spent on dealing with the natural gas emergency, from responding to citizen inquiries to communicating with various agencies and representatives on the evolving situation. KMJ does estimate that we'll begin to have a clearer picture of the financial fallout later this week, hopefully. So just ask you all to continue watching your emails for communication from me, because we most likely will need to schedule a special meeting to deal with that once we start to get a better idea of what our actual costs will be. So that is all I have for this evening, unless there's any questions.
Thank you, Ethan. Council, any questions? Seeing no inquiring questions out there, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second for adjournment this evening. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No same sign. Motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you, council.